Okay, so we are so happy to welcome Dr. Abby Halpin today. As I said, so she's a physical therapist, and I just thought it would be wonderful to have an expert in the field of physiology and how she understands applying it to singers. And so, Abby, well, everybody has questions, including me, but is there, as we start out here, any broad strokes that you notice in particular with singers when you work with them? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And I'm going to put her on speaker view.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, and what a just group of positivity. This is just such a nice way to spend an afternoon with you all. And anytime I get to hear singers, I miss having singers in my little room singing at me while I get to look at other things. So anytime I get to hear you sing, I'm so happy. Yeah, broad strokes, the things that I tend to notice most often, and I always hate to put a category of people into a pattern, right? But that's just all PTs. Is that a lot of times my singers come in with kind of this hyperinflation issue, and Sarah got to hear me talk about this at the NATS check, because it's the thing that I was like, okay, I'm sick of treating this one thing. We gotta talk about this in a group setting. Hyperinflation is essentially when somebody has achieved a postural pattern of having the most mobility into inflation and having the least mobility into exhalation. So what that means is someone is more likely to be standing a little bit forward on the balls of their feet with their knees locked, a little bit more curve in their low back and their ribs lifted, and mid-back flat. This also comes along with a lot of this kind of posture, or if I go from the side, that posture. It just depends on what the path of least resistance is for you. And the thing that I notice the most about this is that what ends up happening is singers are not having the stamina to get through phrases, or they're having to work extra hard in their accessory muscles to produce sound because they are trying to inhale on an inhaled system and there's no more inhale to go. And then they don't have the greatest motor control on exhalation. And I know that I grew up singing, with my music here, taught to this noble sternum. Was that a thing you guys ever heard? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Noble sternum, right? And then at the time I was a soprano one, so I always stood in the same direction, looking off to the same in the same way. So and so I tend to see these just breathing patterns that turn into movement posture, right? There's nothing wrong with being there. And if that's the way that it works best to sing, that's fine. It's just if you walk around the rest of your world like that and you forget to put it all down and relax, that is when I start seeing people with injuries, or where they start losing the ability to use the other half of the range of motion in an effective way for singing.
And so, does that all resonate with everyone, what she's talking about? Yeah.
A lot of nodding. Okay.
A lot of nodding. And so, of course, the inhalation phase is something we work a great deal on in singing. What cues, what cognitive cues can we give our singers to help pattern an inhalation that doesn't come with overinflation, as I believe you called it?
Yeah. Hyperinflation. Great question. I would say paying attention to just the sensory input of your body, meaning making sure that you can feel your heels grounded. It doesn't mean all of your weight has to be back on your heels, but to make sure that you can feel them on the floor. I treat dancers too, and you can imagine they want to be on the balls of their feet all day as well. And I know singers have to know how to dance often, depending on what type of performance you're in. But being up on the balls of your feet enough where you don't have the sensation of feeling your heels on the floor. So feel your heels grounded, actually letting your sternum kind of relax, almost in and down. Practicing singing like that. It doesn't mean I need you to go sing like that forever, but just being able to, having that kind of vocabulary available is nice. I think those are the two things. And I mean, we all know unlock your knees, right? So you don't fall over on stage, but from a postural perspective, that helps decompress your low back. It helps you let your ribs kind of just come down.
One of the things I notice, and we've talked about this because you helped me in the book with that section of rib cage, where teachers are saying things like, keep your ribs out, hold your ribs out, right? And I, of course, we must have that lateral expansion of the rib cage to allow the air to come into the lungs. But then there becomes a rigidity in trying to maintain that, and it creates what I perceive as issues around the xiphoid process area of locking, where those abdominal muscles connect, and we creates all sorts of issues. So, any thoughts about that aspect of what, especially for classical singing, the appoggio is what we call it, the leaning?
Yeah, I think that that expansion laterally, as you said, have to have it, right? And if it's a strategy to keep them out while you sing, that's fine. It's just the lack of the ability to even let them drop back in while you're exhaling that gets people into trouble. And the reason it gets people into trouble is that if you've got, so this is your diaphragm, right? Your ribs kind of run along my arms here. When you inhale, the diaphragm flattens down, which is the ribs traveling apart. If you're already there before you have taken your breath in, you only get this much, right? You're just lacking that range of motion. So in between, like, you're waiting for your part to come in, or, just walking around your day when you're not singing, you have to also know how to drop those ribs down so that the diaphragm can dome back up when you exhale. Then you've got space to go. You've got air to take in so that you can create power on the way back out. The other issue is that lack of power. So if your abdominals grab your ribs and pull them back in, when you're at the end of your phrase and you're like, I need 2 more beats, so please keep exhaling, right? You have to have some of that rib pull in to get your diaphragm to come all the way up so that your air can keep traveling out. If you only have that much range of motion, you only get to exhale that much too, which is a definite problem for singing.
Well, how was that for a beautiful description, everyone? I mean, that's just a lovely description. So let's open it up for, let's stick with this part of the conversation for just a moment. And Eric, go ahead.
So this is something that Dr. Reagan and I have struggled with a lot, because that's how I was trained, was keeping this up. And it's pulled my ribs out, so I have a lot of rib flare. And so I've been working a lot on trying to bring my ribs back into alignment with my core, but that causes my upper back to round. So so that happens. So is an exercise to get all of that air out, I guess, because now I'm realizing that I don't do exhale all the way. Would that be something to try training, is just exhaling, wow, all the air out that we can before taking another breath, and to try to bring that range of motion not so hyper. Did that sentence make sense?
Yes, I am totally with you. And also, like, you don't need me. Yes, the answer is yes, do that. A lot of times what I will do is I'll give people balloons to blow up so that they've got a little bit of resistance to breathe into, so that they really do have to activate their exhalation muscles. And this is, again, not because you have to work, you should be working that hard to sing, but you should be able to have that strength so that then when you go to sing, it's like, no big deal to get into that range of motion. So it's kind of like, I use the sports metaphor a lot of, like, when you're on deck in baseball, you swing 2 bats so that the one bat is like no big deal. But that's what I use with the balloon. So I'll have people blow up into a balloon. I actually have people round their backs. Rounded mid-backs are supposed to be rounded, right? That you have that S curve. If you take away the top curve of your S, you're going to require a lot more bottom curve of your S to remain upright. So let yourself get actually a little bit round. I think the other issue with kind of the fear of having the rounded mid-back is there's 2 ways to have a rounded back. The first one is to actually, like, let your sternum relax down, and that just creates a little bit of a curve in your mid-back. That's good. Sometimes what happens is people pair that with their shoulders coming forward, and that's going to create a lot of stuff that you all know not to do, right? Like, this isn't helpful. So letting your sternum come down actually elongates and lets all of this relax. Rounding your shoulders makes all of this work. So letting yourself, if you all just do it right now, like, find a place where you can put your heels flat on the floor. You feel your heels on the floor, because that helps you just get out of a hyperinflation pattern if you happen to be someone who does that. And then just sigh air out to the point where you start to feel your abdominals turning on, and let your sternum, you all have your hands here, let your hand just like float down towards like the button of your jeans as you exhale and sigh. All of you are doing this perfectly. You notice your shoulders aren't going anywhere, right? This is how you exhale without staying in this up, high school Abby soprano posture. I also did ballet, so I was screwed, guys. So the idea is to essentially let yourself get a little grounded in your mid-back without accentuating it by pulling on your pecs and everything in the front. Did that answer your question, Eric?
It did. It's
Okay.
still something that I'm working with, and I'm doing a lot of exercises to strengthen the muscles in my back so I don't have this motion while I do that.
Do you do the like straw exercises that I see everybody doing?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay. Use your straw and use it as resistance. Forget the balloon thing. Just like sit somewhere where your feet are grounded, maybe all the way back in the chair so the chair's like doing some work so your system gets to totally chill out, and exhale all of your air out through the straw, and you're going to feel ridiculous. You're going to get to the point where you're like, and you're like squeezing all the air out. And you'll really notice what's working, and you'll start to feel your ribs kind of like diving into that range of motion.
And again, that's not necessarily what we want for controlled singing. This is to counteract the hyper extension of the thorax.
Exactly.
Totally.
Let me find Sarah. Hang on. Sarah, there you are. Sarah, do you by chance have a balloon? We talked about this.
Yes, I can grab it.
Is it nearby?
Yes, but it's in the other room.
Okay, well, you had a question.
Yeah, I had 2 questions. So sorry, but we can split it up. I don't want to hog your time. But one of them was, as I'm going through my repertoire, I feel like I've done a lot better at not overexpanding, because I know you said that was an issue, and I take these huge breaths, and I think it's psychologically me compensating for being a little smaller. I want to have a big breath, but I've gotten a lot better at just breathing for what feels comfortable, which has helped. But I was wondering what your thoughts were on being able to take in a quick breath without having everything release and taking a quick breath, because I'm finding that it's difficult for me to take a quick breath that's good. And then my other question was just clarifying what the exercises with the balloon, I know you explained it just now, but why, I just need to hear it one more time.
Yeah, why the balloon?
Yeah, why the balloon? And then like, why are we like rounding in that? Well, I was rounding in a certain way, like this, like leaning forward. And I'm wondering like how I can apply that when I'm singing, or if I should just not even think about it when I sing.
I mean, mostly don't think about it. Think about whatever Dr. Ragan tells you to think about. But the point of getting round for somebody who tends to be in the opposite is just to work the other end of the range of motion. It's just to broaden your vocabulary so that then when you are in neutral, right? And I hate the idea of neutral alignment, because we should be adaptable and can be anywhere in that spectrum and still be really productive people. But if we are in neutral, but your neutral is at the end range, right? Like if I'm sitting here and you have all of this available, and then your end range of going backwards is actually here, you have to stand at your end range to be in neutral. That's a lot of work. That would be like having to walk around your day at the end range of your hamstring stretch, right? Like if you bent down and touched the floor, that's how you had to be productive. That's a lot of work to hold the end. So to broaden your vocabulary in the other end of the direction, and then you get to bounce back and be somewhere in the middle that's nice and easy, and then you can just think about your music. That's going to be a lot less workload for your brain and for your body, and then you can spend it on your singing. The reason that I give a balloon, or like the straw that I just described, is because the resistance going out gives you more feedback for what's working. That's all it is. In terms of the balloon, it also gives you feedback, because the way I teach the balloon exercise is you blow up the balloon, and then you have to stick your tongue to the roof of your mouth and breathe in through your nose without letting the air back in while you breathe. The holding the air out in the balloon means that you hold a little bit of your exhalation muscles on while you breathe in. And if I can have you do that in a certain position that's specific to you, that means that you're going to breathe into the exact area that I want you to, right? If you were my patient. So if I'm like, wow, you're just really compressed through your whole right side. If you're somebody who just like has that kind of slopey right shoulder, and I want you to expand into the right side, I'll put you in a position where you're all slopey on the left and then make you breathe into the balloon. So you have to expand over there. So I kind of use the balloon to manipulate you with the best intentions to get expansion in the place where you need and get compression in the place where you're just not as good at it.
Got it.
Did that cover that, Sarah?
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
The quick breath thing, that's a great question. I think it kind of still comes to having your diaphragm be able to work in a broad range of motion, both from a mobility standpoint, but also from a power standpoint. So if you can create, because it's not that I want you to just like put dumbbells on your diaphragm, right? But if you can create a position where your diaphragm is in a really easily activated position. So if your ribs are pulled apart and your diaphragm is long, it's harder to, pulled down, it's harder to activate a muscle that's either too short or too long, like at the ends, than it is if it's in the middle, right? So if you're doing a bicep curl, you have a lot more power in the middle than you do like all the way at the end or all the way at the end. If you were lifting something, you're gonna do it with your elbow bent around a 90-degree angle because you have more power there. The same thing is true from your diaphragm, it's just not voluntary. So if you can create a position where your diaphragm lives in that middle range, you're gonna have more power to have that air move quickly. Same thing goes for every other breathing muscle, abdominals, intercostals, I mean, name one, right? If you can have neutral be easy, then you can go to the ends real quick and have power. If you're living at an end, you're not gonna have power to get out of it.
Right. Sarah, do you, while we continue questions, do you want to, would it be beneficial, Abby, if she just did one of your balloon exercises for us? And
Sure.
So we'll keep going and then we'll come back to you, okay?
I'll be right back.
So I have a question for you. Of course, I talk about the lateral expansion of the rib cage. That's how I was taught, of course, taking into account 360 degrees. And I definitely, over the years of teaching and talking to different singers, I do believe that there are different breathing patterns depending on body type. There isn't only one right way, right? There are some actual truths. There are some facts about breath mechanics for life and then for singing. But that is what works for me. But I saw something recently that I really loved as well, where this person had someone put their hand on the lower abdominals, transverse obliques, and then talked about the latissimus dorsi in the back and had a hand back there and got this more anterior posterior, which I know because of you, I included in my book, making sure that the posterior wall also releases on inhalation. And so I just wanted your thoughts about this lateral, this anterior, posterior as we inhale for singing. Just any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that we are multi-planar beings, meaning we have to move forward, back, side to side, and rotation. And our breath reflects that as well. And so the idea of breathing in 360 degrees is exactly right. Our ribcage should expand in all directions. Typically, we're less mobile in the back because there's a spinal column there, and we're more mobile in the front. So people have a better feeling of their front moving and their sides moving. The reason that I have wanted to include some of the that feeling of your lats, the back side of your body expanding, is because kind of the same topic where people were so good at expanding, if this is the back of your body, into the front of the body and the sides, that they kind of started like spiraling themselves into that more. So they kept getting more mobile in the front and kept getting less mobile in the back. And that's just going to limit you because it's going to create that forward motion and limit that back half of the range. So just increasing the awareness of the fact that we should expand into the back of our ribs. Those ribs are actually more mobile than you think. Because even the spinal levels are mobile. So if like each spinal level stacked up each rib is attached to those levels, right? And those will move as we breathe. They should, right? Just like a bridge needs to move so that it doesn't collapse, right? So being able to expand into your back essentially takes away the possibility that you're going to keep moving yourself into that front neutral position where your neutral is now more forward than really nice and stacked up.
Okay. And is there any importance? I made it a bit of a point in the book, because in my teaching I find it's important that singers realize that the abdominal wall is moving outward because it's a release of a contraction, but the rib cage is moving laterally outward, posterior, anterior a little bit as well, because it is a contraction of muscles. And to me, that seems important somehow, because I think a lot of singers think that outward abdominal release is actually muscles contracting and moving outward.
I see. Yeah.
And that's a different experience. Anyway, any thoughts? I'm putting you on the spot with that one a little bit, but.
Yeah, no, I like that, because it's funny, I didn't think about it that way, but this is good. It's the difference between asking someone to work less or work more. So creating expansion, especially forward, well, in all directions, should be a sense of letting go,
Right.
rather than like, I'm going to pull myself into this position.
Right.
So it gives your body, even just in terms of like getting through performance, if you're not working with every in and out, you're going to last a lot longer.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. Because as we are talking anterior, posterior, that is a release. To allow that, to enable that is a release. And I just think there's something in that I think is important for singers. And in that perhaps is some of the answer about taking a quick breath.
Yes. Oh, good point. Being able to let go just as fast as you can turn on.
That's right.
That's a really trendy topic in sports right now.
Oh.
Where people, especially professional athletes, are giving themselves, and the trainers are giving them exercises where they have to fully relax between each rep. So like say they have to like catch a big like 20-pound ball and throw it back, right? So they'll catch and throw, and then their trainer will say relax, and then they have to catch and throw, because it makes them the most adaptable to whatever sport they're doing. This was football players, but whatever sport they're doing. And I think it's true for whatever you're training, music, dance, sports, whatever. If you can turn off and on both just as efficiently,
Yep.
then there's really nothing stopping you from being a very variable and adaptable athlete in your music.
For me, that's the staccati, whether it's a s, s or a ba, ba. I'm always talking about the engagement and then the release. The release of that engagement is equally important. The ability to do that quickly, I think, is important. Otherwise, they end up staying in kind of a hyperfunction, would you say, Abby, or is that overstated?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can put any word you want on it. It's just muscles that are just want to stay on and don't want to turn off.
Abby worked so hard with me on my text box in the respiratory about how to define all the
Like engagement, activation.
Yes. Yeah, we really worked hard on that, I tell you. Sarah, do you have your balloon?
So I have really bad news. I had it and somebody moved it. That's what living with other people is. But I did bring a glove, and it might work.
I have a balloon.
Very quarantine vibes.
Abby, do you want to just show us? Would that be?
Yeah. Let me go grab my my balloon stash. I'll be right back. Okay. I don't know how this is going to sound. My microphone's right here. Good luck, everybody. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into it. You can't see me, but I'm on a position where my feet are on the ground. If I was in a chair with a back, but I'm on like a medical stool because physical therapy live, I would sit all the way back in my chair so I can feel the back of the chair. And if you can't touch your feet to the floor when you're all the way back in your chair, get a little something, like a ream of paper or something under your feet. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to blow into the balloon and make it bigger. And then I'm going to put my tongue to the roof of my mouth just behind my top teeth. Like you're kind of make that click noise, but you don't really make the click. Can you feel it kind of makes a seal?
Mm-hmm.
And then breathe in through my nose, and then I'll breathe back out into the balloon. This is pressure, guys. All right, here we go. And I would do that 4 or 5 times. I don't want the balloon to pop at you guys. The idea is that my ribs are drawing down and in as I blow up, and then because I am someone, and I'm kind of doing it the way that I had taught Sarah, somebody who needs to draw my ribs in and expand into my back, hold that tension in the front, and tension is a good thing in this one exercise, right? Hold that in the front so that then when I go to inhale, I can't inhale in the front, I have to inhale into the back.
I love
So that's the balloon.
Wonderful. All right, let's see. Who else has questions? Joseph.
I have tons of questions.
So, similar to Eric and true to form for a lot of singers, my question is self-serving and about my own experience, but I know it's an experience that's shared by at least one other person. So something that Dr. Ragan and I have worked on in the pursuit of rib expansion is Dr. Ragan will put her hands on me and say, I feel nothing moving, just nothing moving whatsoever. But my experience kinesthetically in my own body is it feels like I am maintaining expansion. So in the absence of going and seeing somebody like you, what's a way that I could try to self-assess in quarantine what exactly is going on? Am I right? Is Dr. Ragan right? It's probably both, but probably more Dr. Ragan. How do I fix it?
Great question. A couple of directions I could go with that. I think the way that it's hard to assess this on yourself without somebody else there. So let me start with telling you how I would assess you if you were here, and then maybe we can come up with a way for us to do it with you over there, right? I would have you on my little table over here and basically like pin certain areas down and then ask you to breathe. Usually I don't tell people what I'm doing. I'm just like, hey, I'm gonna put pressure here. You just keep breathing, right? Because then all of a sudden they're like trying to put air in places. So really pressing ribs down and then just kind of watching what else expands or doesn't expand, and then do the opposite side. And sometimes I'll have people lay on their side and just put a hand on the back of the ribs and the side of the ribs and see which expands either first or more. It's usually the side that it should be more because it's just more mobile over there. That's fine. But when nothing moves over here, that's when we're like, okay, something needs to give back here. If she's not feeling anything move, I feel like one of two things is happening. Either you don't have the mobility to move, or you're already in the end of that mobility. And so you don't have any more to go. And that's why it's hard for me to answer without you like in here for me to assess. So without having a further like evaluation, what I would probably recommend in that instance is to essentially work both ends of the range of motion and just see what comes easily and see what comes harder to you. So kind of doing like a blow up the balloon or the straw thing that I described earlier and working full exhalation and see if you can really get yourself to move down. If you can, that's a good thing because you have range of motion there. If you can't get yourself to expand, but you can go in, you can guess that you're probably already at the end of your expansion. If you can expand, but you have a hard time like finding your abdominals turning on, or you're just like, it almost like cramps instead of moves, then you're probably not very good at exhaling and you need to work on, you know what I mean? So like you can kind of work either end and see what feels easier. Is there a certain part of you that she feels like is not moving? Is it your back? Is it your sides? Is it the whole thing?
It's usually ribs, at least.
So like the sides?
The lateral expansion.
Okay.
And it maybe at the beginning, and this is probably with most of my singers, it's a big focus where maybe the first breath we can see it, but then when they have to take subsequent breaths throughout a song, you know, or a quick breath, right? Now our goal is to buoyantly maintain in a range. You know, I talk about if A is neutral and C is a nice expansive breath and B is in between A and C, that we're going to, as we sing, stay in this somewhat of a range, because I don't want them locking out, but I also don't want this complete collapse all the way back in. So A to or C to B is the range.
Yeah.
And if they have to take a quick breath and I don't feel any movement, then I'm feeling like their body is not providing that buoyant expansion that it needs to provide good airflow for singing classical repertoire. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I think in that case, what's likely happening is you take your first breath and it does move, right? And either what's happening is you're not then letting it go again while you sing so that you don't feel the next expansion, you're already there, or you're getting all the way back to A and then you're not moving again. So I think I would be curious to watch you sing and to get you in here and breathe, because I don't know what the answer is, but I would say practice both end ranges, really accentuate it, and then see if you can live in this middle when you're working on in your lesson.
Joseph, so are you feeling like that you are at C and living in C constantly? And so therefore, yeah, and I really disagree with that. So somewhere between your experience and mine is probably some truth to explore, because if that's what your body's telling you, then I have to listen to that and work with you to figure out the patterns that you are experiencing. But I can almost guarantee that's not the case based on my observations. But we'll get to the bottom of it for sure. And I think I can't see everybody right now all on the screen at once, but I'm looking for other people that I've worked on this with to be nodding and what their experiences are. Yeah,
a couple hands there.
Tina, did you want to say something, or you just were raising your hand that you're...
Oh yeah, just acknowledging that I'm someone that you've also worked with lateral expansion with, as you have.
Oh, we lost her. She froze.
Oh.
Oh, she'll come back. Oh, yeah, okay.
You were frozen. Am I?
You're frozen, Tina.
Sorry.
There, now you're back. Anyway, we heard you that it's something. Did that clarify anything for you, Tina? Did Dr. Halpin's answer in this discussion help clarify anything?
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Does anyone else have a question?
Okay.
Hang on, Eric, go ahead.
Oh shoot, hold on. Okay, there it is. It came back. So I have a question, and maybe Dr. Ragan can answer this too. I just thought of this. When I was first being trained in breathing, I was always told to lay on my back, usually with my knees bent, and then some teachers would put things on my tummy. And that's not something that Dr. Ragan has ever done with me. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I don't have breathing problems, I have no idea. But what is that? And Dr. Ragan, how does that tie in possibly with you, the abdominal support belt that you do sometimes? Are those related? Is this thing a myth? What?
Well, I'll let Abby answer as well, but I will just tell you that the book on the belly thing, that's one of those things that has been around for many years, since I was a young singer, and probably before that. It was the way that we were taught to breathe. And that is, I think, why I'm so specific in my teaching and in the book, to make the point that the abdominal wall moves outward as a release of a contraction. Because for me, that taught me to push, and there are no muscles. I remember asking Abby over and over, now wait, there are no muscles that move the belly outward, right? And, I've asked PTs, they're like, no, right? But that is what that gave the impression of to me as a young singer, and I think to many others, and that I think creates a lot of issues. So I don't use that. I'm not saying that people couldn't use it and teach it in a way that they found benefit, so I won't speak to that. And what was the other? The surgical abdominal support was a gift to me from my beloved Ellen Fall, the very famous teacher of mine. She believed that people that were little like me just had a harder time feeling their girth, as she would say, and feeling that expansion. And so she had me buy that right away. And I really do credit it with teaching me um, an understanding to connect to my lower body. And Abby,
Mm.
you know what we're talking about? You
Mhm.
saw it in my book. So it's this Futuro surgical abdominal support that goes right under the bra down to the belly. And it just gave me a sense of, and I use this word judiciously, resistance. Right.
Mm.
It gave me that sense. And then you have to, as the teacher, I have to teach people, yes, there is resistance, but I don't mean that in a negative way. I don't want you muscling against the belt, right? But it just provides you some awareness and then to buoyantly maintain between B and C with that belt. So no, the belt is really more rib cage with a little
Okay.
abdominal wall
Mhm.
contact, where the books were more abdominal wall. And when I was very young, I started studying at 12 or 13, and my teacher had me wear a really thin belt. I would take a breath and I'd hook it around my rib cage, and I spent the entire lesson picking it up off the floor. And again, whilst I appreciate what that teacher was trying to teach me, I think the method probably created again more tension because I had to keep my ribs out for that belt not to fall to the ground. So that creates that rigidity that Abby is speaking directly against. So that's why I loved Miss Fall's surgical abdominal support,
Mm.
because it provides a different kinesthetic experience. So I've said enough. Abby, would you like to respond to the book, belly book, and the
I mean, yes, I agree with all of that. I think the other big difference is that the belt is a 360Q and the book is just going anteriorly forward. So you're missing the rest of your expansion range of motion. And the other problem with I had the book thing too. I used to have to, my teacher's middle school letters were PMS. And so she used to make me like yell these, like, how embarrassing for a teenage girl to be yelling this. Um, but so the belly that goes out is not, it's because of abdominal pressure. So if we have our diaphragm and our pelvic floor, they should be working together to maintain the pressure inside the abdomen as an okay amount. If your pelvic floor lets go, you're peeing, right? If your diaphragm lets go, you're going to do something coming up. So you want to keep that, maintaining the same. By giving pressure to raise the book going forward, you're pressing down and asking your pelvic floor to work hard to answer that pressure. And if it doesn't, bad things will happen, right? Not that you're going to be injured, just embarrassing things are going to happen. So that's a lot of work to ask, especially a young kid who's usually the one who's doing that exercise, right? To answer that pressure with their pelvic floor, they end up with long-term motor patterns that you have to then unlearn. And it's not damaging, it's just annoying because it results in some other things.
So is that pelvic answer is because Dr. Ragan and I were talking about core engagement today because she wants me to get deeper core engagement. So I'm working on trying to find that. Is that pelvic answer?
Yes, that's part of it. Yeah. So when we engage our abdominals, you usually feel them from the side and from the front, right? They are attached in the back, but we usually have a better awareness of what's happening in the front. So you get that engagement, your ribs get drawn in slightly, not huge, but in slightly. So your diaphragm gets to come up and your pelvic floor comes up. These two work together. They always work together. If not, you're going to have some kind of pressure system problem. And so getting your abdominals to pull your ribs in should automatically get your pelvic floor to raise as well, and your diaphragm to raise as well.
And Abby and I found there is not a lot written about pelvic floor engagement in singers. We're starting to get, and that was Joan Melton's work from the Nats chat that we did, and we did find a couple articles that are referenced in the book about that. But it's interesting. I think that there's more for singers to understand about that.
Especially because the top part of the pressure system is your vocal cords. Yeah. So if pelvic floor, diaphragm, and vocal cords aren't doing things, aren't in sync, then you're going to get tension, or you know what I mean, whatever word that means more work somewhere. And it's either going to be your pelvic floor, your diaphragm, or your vocal cords. And honestly, I don't know what I'd pick. They all sound kind of annoying.
All right. Anybody else have a question? Megan.
Yes, mine's probably not going to be applicable to anyone else, so I apologize in advance. So speaking of sort of pelvic floor, I guess I'm just wondering if you have anything that someone who's postpartum after a C-section trying to get back into singing shape should consider with breathing, because I feel both overly tight and disengaged at the same time in all different places. But I mean, I know you'd have to see me, but maybe is there anything general that I can think about, or, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a friend who just described this feeling to me as she felt like everything got shifted around and then a big empty spot was left. So then her muscles don't really know where to go after that. Usually the first thing that I do is have people work on some breathing exercises while laying down, because then you're really supported from your pelvis to your diaphragm, at least on the back half. And just trying to get that sense of gathering and release, gathering, release. A lot of PTs make the mistake of only work on the activation, the gathering, engagement, whatever you want to call it, and they never work the release, which is the same problem that Kari was just talking about with the quick breath. So what that does to your pelvic floor is it teaches it to turn on and it never teaches it to turn back off. So working the on and off switch is the first thing that I would do, and then progress that into like sitting, hands and knees, standing with your back against the wall, and then finally to standing in terms of like maybe squats and like that kind of stuff. But just kind of like working from the ground up to standing and getting that internal sense of on and off from both abdominals and your pelvic floor. You won't feel your diaphragm, but you can trust if those things are doing things well that your diaphragm is moving. Does that help? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's a question for a lot of postpartum women, Megan. So I'm glad you asked that. Yeah.
And don't ever feel bad about asking a question just for you. That is physical therapy school. We're all like, what happens when your knee, we're all just learning about ourselves.
And Abby, I had a singer yesterday who does have a diagnosed lesion. And she was saying that lately she's feeling really tight, like her muscles are so tight. So I gave her, the stretch against the wall that you, of course, have given me. But I just wonder for singers overall, what guidance you would have about this area, which of course is near our larynx.
Yeah. That area usually feels tight for a couple of different reasons. We got into a lot of discussion about what tight means when we were talking about your book. So let's just start there. So tight, the word tight is a sensation. It means you feel tight. That doesn't mean that a muscle is living too short or too long. It can be either. So if you imagine a hamstring at this longest position, there's nowhere else to go. It's going to feel tight, right? I get my ballerinas coming in and their leg is like right here next to their nose. And they're like, my hamstring feels tight. I'm like, thank God. Otherwise it'll break off. So tight is just the feeling of getting to the end of your range of motion wherever it is. So if something feels tight, it doesn't mean stretch it. It means find somebody who can tell you if it's long or short and then address it. Usually we feel tight here for one of two big reasons. Usually it's actually shoulder blades that are sitting really low. So I can get that kind of like, again, I did ballet, right? That really long neck, like shoulders down, swanny thing, right? And so what happens is these are my shoulder blades. If your shoulder blades are sitting kind of down, then all of the muscles that attach from the back of your head to your shoulder blades are living in a really long position and required to work there. Again, more work is when you're at the end of range of motion, right? Too short or too long. So if you're at that long point and then they have to hold your arms on your body, because oddly enough, the only place our arms attach from a bony standpoint is that little joint in the front here. Everything else is your shoulder blades, the muscles that attach to your shoulder blades holding your arm on, which is kind of cool. So if all of those are working really hard, then you're having to hold yourself up with these muscles all day. And that's going to feel awful. The other reason that people get tension there is usually for like faux stability. So somebody who doesn't have a great bite, or they have a hard time this is going down a rabbit hole, but like disassociating their eyes from their head. So there are people who, like, you've probably seen these people where they're like, their head goes where their eyes go, right? They kind of like walk around the world like a log. Yeah. So if they have a hard time dissociating those things, if they're teeth grinders, they're trying to seek stability somewhere, and sometimes they'll find it by holding there. It doesn't mean, hey, go stretch because there goes your stability. It means find where you're lacking the stability so that you can let go of this strategy. It's serving you in some way. It's just that, you know, like, so getting it to go longer is just going to make it go, no, but seriously, I'm in charge of you. I'm holding you up and making you be okay in this world. So you got to find your stability somewhere else.
Fantastic. That's great. Any other last question from anyone?
Just really quick from me, if that's okay. I just kind of tailing onto what you were just saying, Abby. Nice to meet you, by the way. I hadn't had a chance to meet you before. I was going to ask about working with singers that have had jaw tension issues, TMJ and things like this. I imagine that we could kind of keep going down the road that you're talking about, and, you know, in recruiting the other muscles. And I loved what you said about seeking stability. You know what I mean? If that's what's causing some of those things. But I was more just going to ask if you had any sort of ideas for how to help people who that because that so directly affects the comfort or lack of pain when trying to sing. I have one who sometimes comes to me and said, what can I tell you? I've been grinding my teeth while I sleep the last 5 nights, and it hurts every time I sing. And I said, well, then, you know, we need to, it's like you said, you need to find somebody to tell you what's wrong. And yes, my cat is also in the masterclass today. This is Sophie.
I'm like trying real hard to listen to your question. I'm like, it's a kitty.
I know.
You know how entertained I am by pets, and your cat is making quite the appearance, right?
She's all over the place.
Oh,
and she's also drooling
diva.
like crazy on me.
It's either the cat or the dog.
Yeah, it's both.
Oh, too funny. Yeah,
Anyway.
the jaw tension or the teeth grinding thing is such a common, it's common for all human beings, like not just musicians. The fact that singers, you know, have to use that area of your mouth means it's more important to you. I think that it's just what you said. It's somebody's approach to holding their head on their body. If they're not doing it from somewhere else, they're going to create tension here to feel stable. Like if we all do it right now and just like bite really hard, like you don't have variability. You're not going to easily like bobblehead and clench your jaw at the same time. Right? So you're trying to hold your head on using your teeth. So the things that I would look at is really what your bite is like. If you tap your teeth together, do you feel both sides in the back-ish tapping at the same time, or does one hit and not the other? Some people don't feel the backs of their teeth touch at all.
Sure.
That's what's called a posterior open bite, and they're the biggest people or biggest population who will seek that and like I'm trying to find that stability there or that sense of touching. But then going down the chain, if you're somebody who like you don't have enough ankle range of motion to get your heels down, then you're going to bite down. You know, I mean, you could find a layer somewhere in your body that would result here.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's really cool stuff. You know, I mean, I know that you're probably doing all the things that singers know to you know, doing the jaw massage and all of the direct things. So if you weren't somebody who already knew all of that, I'd be like, oh, do some jaw massage, right? But I feel like you're probably already doing all of that. And so I would start looking somewhere else in your system to see where you're trying to create stability from, and that this is taking over for.
I see.
The other thing that can happen, and this is again a weird rabbit hole, but when we walk, our pelvises move side to side, right? Our skull bones do the same thing. Our temporal bones actually rotate slightly. It's called temporal wobble while we move. And if you don't have that mobility up here to wobble so that you can actually shift your body from side to side, again, you'll just go, okay, I'll hang on for dear life. So there's a couple different things that we could look at there.
Okay.
If it's not fixed by the simple thing, it's worth getting someone to look at the rest.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Can we all open our mics and thank Dr. Halpin for incredible. And what I love this demonstration for you singers, for my students, is the interdisciplinary, the multidisciplinary approach, right? I have a piece of the puzzle, but when I go to these medical conferences, I'm so dependent on the doctors and the speech language pathologists for their perspective. And as part of the entire voice team, right, we explore with a physical therapist and other specialists, sometimes a dentist, right, depending on what we're looking at. And so I love that you guys got to witness this kind of collaboration of expertise between Abby and I today. And I hope that of all things that that's what you take away. So I really appreciate it. Thank you, Abby, for being here.
No problem. I also had emailed Kari about this, but if any of you just want to do like a quick phone chat, and I'm not one of those people who's like, call me for 15 minutes and then I'm going to sell you on why you should come. That's not what I mean. If you just have like a quick question or like, hey, this thing is bothering me. Is it worth seeing somebody, or is there a quick thing I can do about, call, email, send me a message on Instagram, whatever. I'll add it to the little chat here so you can copy that. I'd be happy to do little free phone consults for any of you.
Is it useful for you to, this is kind of a redundant question, but to see, like when you watched Will, were you watching to look for patterns of body movement that would be informing his singing?
Yes, I love when people come in and sing, and I will circle you as you sing. It's a little weird, but the good news is no matter what I'm going to tell you, your voice is beautiful. But yes, always, it's super helpful to watch someone sing because you get into musical you and you forget about like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? Everybody can say, oh yeah, this is how I breathe all the time. And this is how I sit at my computer all the time. Right? No, I got to watch you doing the real thing.
Yeah, I love that. So more collaboration coming for sure between you and I.
Absolutely. And actually, is it Joseph or Joe who asked the question about the expansion? I have more ideas that I've been jotting down for you, so call me.
I'm going to stop the recording.